I gripped the rifle tighter as the shadow lunged from the underbrush, its eyes gleaming like polished obsidian in the fading light. My heart hammered against my ribs, 10 years old or so, Ma said, but feeling every bit the child I was as I squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed through the Oregon pines, and the cougar crumpled mid-leap, its body twitching once before going still. Blood seeped into the dirt, warm and metallic on the air, and I stood there shaking, the weight of the gun pulling at my arms like it was heavier than the whole damn world. Pa was already moving, his boots crunching over fallen needles as he knelt beside the beast. "Good shot, Elias," he grunted, not looking up, his knife flashing as he began the skinning. His face was etched deep with lines from years of trail dust and bad luck, but his voice held steady like always. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and glanced back at the wagon where my sisters huddled. Lila, the oldest at what should be 14 but looked no more than 8, clutched little Rose's hand. Rose, frozen at 5 forever unless... I pushed the thought away, not now. We'd been on the trail from Missouri for months, chasing whispers of gold in the Cascades, but the real treasure was supposed to be the land. Free claims for families like ours. Pa said Oregon was God's second chance after the war took half our kin back east. But tonight, with the cougar's corpse steaming at our feet, it felt more like the devil's joke. "Get the fire going," Pa said, wiping his blade on his trousers. "We'll eat well for once." I dragged branches over, my hands still numb from the recoil, and struck the flint until sparks caught. Flames licked up, casting flickering shadows that danced like ghosts among the trees. Lila emerged from the wagon, her braids swinging as she carried a pot, her eyes wide but not scared. Brave like Ma had been. "Is it dead for good?" she asked, voice small but edged with that curiosity she never lost. "Dead as the plague," Pa replied, heaving the hide aside. He didn't mention the curse. We all knew it hung over us like the rain clouds that never quite broke. The Pembertons didn't age right. Not since Grandma's stories of the old country. Some witch's hex on our bloodline. Children stayed young until death claimed one of us. Then we'd jump a year or two like skipping stones on a river. I'd been 6 for 3 winters now, Lila 7 for 4. Rose, well, she was the baby, and we'd lost too many already to keep her growing. As the meat sizzled on spits, Pa sat back, his calloused hands folding in his lap. "Tomorrow we push for the valley. Heard tell of a homestead waitin', with water and soil that ain't cursed." He meant the land, but his eyes flicked to us kids, heavy with what he wouldn't say. The trail had already taken Uncle Tom last spring, fever, and we'd all aged a bit then, bones stretching overnight like weeds after rain. It hurt, that growing. Felt like cracking open from the inside. I poked at the fire, embers popping like questions I couldn't ask. Why us? Why this family? Dragging eternity's weight through mud and mountain? Lila settled beside me, her shoulder brushing mine, solid, unchanging. "Think we'll find it, Eli? A place where we can just be?" I shrugged, forcing a grin. "If not, I'll shoot it." She laughed, soft and real, cutting the chill. But as night deepened, the forest whispered back, and I wondered if the cougar was just the start. If something bigger stalked us, waiting to claim another and force us forward. I gripped the rifle tighter as the shadow in the tree line shifted again. Not wind or beast, but something deliberate. Pa's warning echoed in my head, "Stay inside after dusk." But the barn door creaked open under my push, and there was Elias, my little brother, frozen midway through milking the cow, his eyes wide as saucers. "Tommy," he whispered, voice cracking like dry timber. "It's watching us." I stepped out, boots crunching on frost-kissed hay, the Oregon chill biting through my woolen shirt. The homestead sprawled behind us, cabin squat and sturdy, smoke curling lazy from the chimney where Ma stirred supper. But out here under the pines that clawed at the November sky, the world felt smaller, meaner. Elias was only 10 or so, we'd always said, but he looked it still. Unchanged since Uncle Jed fell to fever 3 winters back. None of us Pemberton young'uns had grown an inch since then. Not me at 14, not Sarah at 12, not even the twins who'd been babes when great-grandpa passed. Folks in town whispered curses, called us touched by the devil, but Pa shut them down with a glare and a loaded Colt. "Get back inside," I hissed, swinging the rifle up, its barrel cold against my cheek. Elias didn't move, his small hands clutching the pail, milk sloshing like spilled secrets. The shadow detached from the trees, a figure tall and hooded moving silent as smoke toward the fence line. Not one of the trappers from downriver. This one carried no pack, no rifle glint, Heart pounding, I leveled the sight, finger itching on the trigger. Who's there? Show yourself. The figure paused, head tilting like a wolf scenting blood. Elias whimpered, dropping the pail. It hit the ground with a dull thud, white liquid pooling in the dirt like a pale omen. I stepped forward, placing myself between him and whatever stalked our claim. Pa had staked this land in '59, fighting off claim jumpers and black bears alike, but he'd never mentioned ghosts or worse. Yet here it was, gliding closer, the hem of its cloak brushing frost from the grass. Tommy, run! Elias finally bolted, scrambling toward the cabin door, but I held ground, breath fogging the air. The figure raised a hand, gloved in black leather, and spoke, a voice like gravel under wagon wheels. Pemberton blood calls the reaper. One must fall for the bloom to come. My stomach twisted. Reaper? We'd heard tales from the Klamath folk, spirits that demanded tolls for the living, but Pa called them squaw stories. Still, the words hung heavy, and as the figure advanced, I fired. The shot cracked sharp, echoing off the hills, splintering bark where it had stood a heartbeat before. Gone. Vanished into the gloom like mist. Elias yanked me inside, slamming the door as Ma called our names, her voice edged with fear. Pa was already at the table, maps spread under lantern light, plotting our winter haul to Portland. What in tarnation? He growled, rising with pistol in hand. Something out there, I panted, reloading the rifle with shaking fingers. Talking about blood and fallen. Pa's face hardened, lines deep as river cuts. He glanced at us kids, me, Elias, Sarah peeking from the loft, all frozen in time since the last death. Ain't no reaper taking what's mine. Tomorrow we fortify. No more milking alone. But as we barred the door and huddled by the fire, I couldn't shake the figure's words. Bloom? Like we were seeds waiting for rot to sprout. Sarah climbed down, her dress still the one from years ago, too short now but not growing out. Tommy, what if it's true? What if we gotta lose someone? I pulled her close, the fire's warmth doing little against the cold settling in my bones. Pa paced, muttering about traps and neighbors, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. The Oregon wilds had taken plenty. Fever, flood, feud, but this felt different. Personal. And as the night deepened, I wondered if our unchanging faces hid a curse that demanded payment. One life for the years we'd stolen. I gripped the rifle tighter, the wood slick against my palms from the morning dew as the first shot echoed through the valley. Pa had taught me to aim for the chest on a charging bear, but this wasn't a bear. It was Elias, our neighbor's eldest, his eyes wild and foam flecking his lips like he'd swallowed rage itself. He burst from the tree line, axe raised, bellowing something about stolen land and cursed blood. My heart hammered. At 13, I looked no older than 10, frozen in that peculiar limbo of the Pemberton gift or curse that kept us kids unchanging until death claimed one of our own. But today, with Ma and the little ones huddled in the cabin, I couldn't afford to stay a boy. Elias, stop, I shouted, voice cracking higher than I wanted, but he didn't hear or wouldn't. His boots churned the mud, closing the gap to the fence line where I stood guard. The family lore whispered in my mind. We'd been this way since Grandpa Pemberton's pact with some frontier spirit, ages ago, children who only grew when the reaper took a toll. It had saved us through fevers and famines, letting us slip through time's grasp, but it bred envy in folks like the Hargroves, who saw our eternal youth as witchcraft. Last night their cows had wandered onto our claim, and now this. I fired wide, the bullet splintering a post beside him, splintering more than wood. It splintered the fragile piece we'd clawed from Oregon's wilds. Elias faltered, axe dipping, but his brothers emerged behind him, 3 shadows with pitchforks glinting in the dawn. Grit filled my throat. I wasn't strong like grown men, but Pa had shown me the land's secrets, how to turn its veins against intruders. Dropping low, I scrambled toward the creek bed, where the spring runoff had carved hidden channels. If I could lead them there, the mud would swallow their charge like it had the wolves last winter. Behind me, the cabin door banged open. Lila, my sister, all of 8 in looks but sharp as a hawkbill knife. "Jem, the powder!" she yelled, tossing a satchel that thudded into the grass. She shouldn't be out here, not with her unchanged face drawing whispers of devilry from the townfolk, but we Pembertons stuck together, aging or not. I snatched it up, reloading as I ran. The metallic click a promise against the shouts gaining on us. Elias's voice cut through. "Your kind ain't natural. We'll end this hex." The creek loomed, its banks treacherous with undercut earth. A trap I'd scouted after Pa's warning of range wars brewing. I vaulted the lip, sliding down into the shallow flow, water shocking cold against my legs. Turning, I braced the rifle on a root, sighting Elias as he crested the edge. My finger hovered. Killing a man would age us all in ways no spirit could reverse. But letting him reach the cabin meant blood anyway. Lila splashed in beside me, her small hands fumbling for rocks to hurl. We hold Jem, like Pa said, together. The first Hargrove brother lunged, pitchfork thrusting, but the bank gave way beneath him, mud slurping him down to his waist. He thrashed, cursing as Elias skidded to a halt, axe forgotten in the face of the sinkhole. For a heartbeat the world hung, our family's strange immortality a shield, but one that painted targets on our backs. I lowered the rifle slightly, mind racing for a way out that didn't end in graves. "Go home, Elias," I called, voice steadier now. "This land's big enough, unless you make it small." He glared, chest heaving, but the trapped brother's pleas pulled at him. With a final snarl, Elias threw a line from his belt, hauling his kin free. The others backed off, vanishing into the trees like smoke. Lila exhaled beside me, her unchanged eyes wide but fierce. We weren't safe. Not with rumors of pauses forming in town, but we'd bought time, and in our world, time was the one thing we could hoard. As the sun climbed, casting long shadows over the creek, I wondered how many more stands we'd make before the curse forced us to grow up the hard way. The wagon lurched over a root hidden in the mud, and I gripped the reins tighter, my knuckles whitening against the leather. Pa's old hat, sweat-stained and frayed at the brim, sat heavy on my head like a crown I never asked for. At 12, though by the calendar it was more like 8. Since Elias died last spring, I was the one driving now. With Ma whispering prayers under her breath and little Sarah huddled against her skirts, eyes wide as saucers. The rain had turned the trail into a slurry of regret, and we'd lost another horse to the fever 2 nights back. Food was down to hardtack and what berries we could snatch, but it wasn't the hunger gnawing at me. It was the way Sarah's face stayed frozen in that doll-like innocence, unchanging, while the world chewed us up. "Keep her steady, Jacob," Ma said, her voice cutting through the patter of rain on canvas. She reached back to steady the crate of Pa's tools, the ones he'd sworn would build us a life out west. Her hand trembled, but she hit it quick like always. Ma was the cautious one, the planner, tallying every mile like beads on a rosary. "We can't afford to mire down here. The river's just ahead." I nodded, biting back the smart reply. The Willamette wasn't just ahead. It was a monster waiting to swallow us whole, swollen from the spring melt and this cursed downpour. We'd heard tales from the traders, families vanishing into its currents, wagons splintered like kindling. But turning back meant the desert again, and we were out of time. Pa's letters from the claim spoke of gold-flecked soil and timber thick as God's own forest. But he was gone 6 months now, silent as the grave. If the curse held true, Sarah wouldn't budge an inch older until... Well, I shoved the thought down deep. The trail dipped and the wheels sank into a divot. I yanked the reins, urging the lone mule forward with a sharp, "Hi-ya!" But she balked, ears flat. Sarah whimpered, clutching Ma's arm. "Is it the river? Will it eat us like the stories?" Ma shushed her gentle, but her eyes met mine over the girl's head, wary, weighing. "Stories are for fools, love. We're Pembertons. We cross or we don't eat come winter." That was Ma's grit talking. The part that kept us moving after the diphtheria took Elias and Aunt Clara in '64. Back then, I'd watch Sarah's cheeks stay pudgy, her steps toddle unchanged while I shot up an inch overnight, the weight of their passing settling in my bones. The family secret, Pa called it, a witch's hex from the old country broken only by death's toll. We aged in fits and starts, stealing years from the lost ones. It made us tough, or so Pa said, but it left scars that didn't show. I hopped down, mud sucking at my boots, and shoved my shoulder against the wagon's side. The mule strained, muscles rippling under sodden hide, and inch by inch we pulled free, sweat mixed with rain on my face, stinging like accusations. Why us? Why this endless tally of graves? But questions wouldn't ford the river. I climbed back up, wiping my brow. "We'll make it. I've got Pa's map, ferry crossings marked clear." Ma's lips thinned. "Maps lie when waters rise. We should scout first." She was right, cautious as ever, but scouting meant leaving the wagon exposed, and with whispers of claim jumpers trailing from the last camp, that risk bit harder than hunger. As the river came into view, a gray beast churning between fur-cloaked banks, a shout echoed from upstream. Riders, 3 of them on lathered ponies, hats low and coats heavy with purpose. Not traders. Their glances were too sharp, too hungry. Rivals, maybe, eyeing our claim from afar. Or worse, men who'd heard the Pemberton whispers. The family that didn't age right, ripe for robbing or worse. "Jacob, get the rifle," Ma hissed, pulling Sarah close. My heart hammered, fingers fumbling for the stock under the seat. The curse had kept us young, but it hadn't taught us to outrun lead. The lead rider raised a hand, not in threat but hail, yet his eyes scanned our meager load like a wolf sizing supper. "Hold there, folks," he called, voice carrying over the roar. "Trails washed out ahead. You headed for the ferry?" I leveled the rifle casual, not aiming, but enough to speak volumes. Ma's hand on my arm steadied me. Teamwork, always her creed. "We are," I replied, voice steady as I could make it. "What's it to you?" He reined in, his partners flanking, faces weathered like old leather. "Name's Harlan. We run the crossing for a fee. But with this flood, it's dicey. Lost 2 wagons yesterday." His gaze flicked to Sarah, lingering on her unchanging face, and something flickered in his eyes. Pity? Suspicion? You got young ones. Might be wiser to winter back east. Ma straightened, her wit flashing like a knife. "East's got nothing but ghosts for us. We'll take our chances. What's the fee?" Harlan named it. Steep, half our remaining coin, and I felt the trap close. Pay up and we'd limp across broke. Refuse and they'd likely take it all. The river mocked us, waves slapping the bank like laughter. Sarah peeked out, whispering, "Jacob, they're bad men." I swallowed, mind racing. "Puzztools, could we jury one into a raft?" The lantern's flame sputtered as I wedged the pickaxe into the crumbling shaft wall, the echo of metal on stone chasing away the drip of water from above. Pa's cough rattled from the tunnel behind me. Deeper now, like gravel in his lungs, and I knew we couldn't stay down here much longer. We'd come into these old mines hoping for gold to buy seed for the spring planting. But all we'd unearthed was damp earth and whispers of cave-ins from the trappers who'd sold us the claim. Eliza tugged at my sleeve, her small hand cold against my wrist, still 8 years old in body, though the years blurred since Mother's passing last winter, when she'd finally ticked forward to 10. "Henry, it's too tight," she whispered, eyes wide in the flickering light. "What if it falls?" I forced a grin, wiping sweat from my brow with a grimy sleeve. "Won't fall if we don't dawdle. Hand me the shovel, quick now." But inside my gut twisted. The air grew thicker by the minute, laced with that metallic tang that meant bad air rising. Pa had insisted we push on. The farm was barren after the blight took the crops, and with Tom and little Sarah unchanged since Uncle Jed's fever 2 summers back, we needed this win. I was the only one moving forward properly, 16 now and feeling every ache of it while my siblings lingered in their frozen youth. A low rumble vibrated through the rock, and Eliza yelped, dropping the shovel. Dust sifted from the ceiling like fine ash. "Pa!" I shouted, lunging back toward the tunnel mouth where he'd been propping the timbers. He was slumped against the wall, face pale as the moonlight filtering through the entrance above, his pickaxe idle in his lap. "Go on, boy," he rasped, waving a hand that trembled. "You and Eliza get out." I'll hold it. No time for arguing." I scooped Eliza up, her slight weight no burden despite the fear clawing at my chest, and bolted for the rope ladder. The ground bucked beneath us, a groan of earth protesting our intrusion, and behind, Pa's shout cut short in a cascade of falling stone. We scrambled topside into the chill Oregon dusk, lungs burning as the mine mouth collapsed in a roar that shook the pines. I dropped to my knees, staring at the rubble, the dust cloud settling like a shroud. Eliza clung to me, silent tears carving tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. "He's gone, isn't he?" she said finally, voice small but steady, the way she always masked her terror with questions. I nodded, throat tight, pulling her close. The family was unraveling, one death at a time. And with Pa buried under that hill, I felt the shift already. The subtle pull in my bones. The way Eliza's grip seemed a fraction firmer, her face edging toward that next invisible line. But Sarah and Tom, playing oblivious by the wagon a quarter-mile off, wouldn't budge yet. Not until the cost mounted higher. We trudged back to the homestead as night fell, the stars pricking the sky like indifferent eyes. The cabin loomed dark and empty, smoke from the evening fire long gone cold. I lit the lamps with shaking hands, portioning out the last of the jerky, while Eliza fetched water from the creek. No words passed between us. What was there to say? Pa's plan had backfired spectacularly. The mine wasn't salvation, just another grave. Tomorrow we'd have to face the neighbors, spin some tale to keep the land speculators at bay, but tonight, survival meant holding the little ones together. As Eliza drifted to sleep by the hearth, her breathing even for the first time since the rumble. I sat watch with Pa's old rifle across my lap. The wind howled through the cracks, carrying the scent of pine and regret. We'd adapt, like always, hunt deeper into the woods, trade what tools we had left, but the curse gnawed at me. How many more had to fall before we all caught up to the years? I reloaded the chambers one by one. The click of metal, a grim promise. No more blind risks. From here we'd carve our way smarter, or not at all. The lantern's flame flickered as I pried open the trapdoor, the wood splintering under my knife like it held a grudge. Below, the root cellar smelled of damp earth and forgotten potatoes. But it was the glint of metal at the far wall that stopped me cold. A rusted latch I swore hadn't been there yesterday. Elias tugged at my sleeve, his eyes wide in that boyish way that never changed. Even after all these years. Pa said not to go poking around down here, Sarah, he whispered, but his voice cracked with the same excitement that always pulled us into trouble. I shot him a look, the kind that said we were beyond Pa's rules now. The fever had taken Ma 3 winters back, aging us both a full year and a night. Elias sprouting an inch, me filling out enough to handle the plow without it dragging. But since Uncle Jed stumbled off that cliff last spring, nothing. We stayed as we were, me at 14 in body if not in days, Elias forever 10. The family whispered about curses in the dark, but out here on the Oregon claim, whispers didn't stake fences or hunt game. If there's a way to break it, I muttered, dropping to the dirt floor. It starts with secrets like this. The latch gave with a groan, revealing a narrow crawl space stuffed with brittle papers and a leather-bound book, its cover cracked like old hide. Elias squeezed in behind me, his breath hot on my neck. We unrolled the first parchment by lamplight. Hand-drawn maps, faded ink marking trails through the Cascades, dotted with symbols that looked like warnings. Look, Elias pointed, tracing a line that snaked toward our homestead. That's the ridge where the Millers' cattle vanished. And here, Pemberton land circled in red. My stomach twisted. The Millers had been our only neighbors worth a damn, until their claim jumped quiet like papers filed in Salem by some faceless lawyer. Pa blamed bad luck. But I'd seen the way their foreman eyed our water rights, his rifle slung too casual across the saddle. If this book held proof of older claims, older blood, I flipped pages, dust coughing into the air. The script was Pa's grandfather's, ranting about a pact with the local tribe. Land for protection, but twisted by death. The young ones bind the years, it read, until the debt is paid in full. Our aging, tied to loss. A chill crawled up my spine, sharper than the draft from above. Elias grabbed my arm as footsteps thudded overhead, Pa's boots heavy and deliberate. Girls, you down there? His voice boomed, laced with that edge he got when worry turned to anger. I shoved the book under my apron, heart pounding like a hammer on anvil. We scrambled up, sealing the trapdoor just as his face appeared at the cellar stairs, lantern in hand casting shadows like accusing fingers. What are you hiding? He demanded, eyes narrowing on the dirt smeared across Elias's knees. Nothing, Pa, I lied, smooth as creek water, stepping between them. Elias nodded too quick, but Pa wasn't fooled. He set the lantern down, crossing his arms over his broad chest, the lines on his face deeper since Ma. At 45, he looked 60, carrying the weight we couldn't. That foreman from the Millers rode by again today, he said finally, voice low. Talkin' surveyors coming next week. If they push that fence line. He trailed off, but I knew. The creek was our lifeblood, and without it the crops withered like last year's hopes. That night, as Pa snored in the loft, I slipped the book under my mattress. Elias curled beside me like a pup. The maps burned in my mind, promising paths to the tribe's old grounds, maybe answers to the curse that kept us stunted. But the red circle mocked me, our land marked for claim and the Millers closing in. If we followed those trails, we'd face more than rivals, ghosts of packs unpaid and deaths that might finally let us grow. Or kill us trying. I lay awake, listening to the wind howl through the cabin cracks, wondering if ingenuity or grit would be enough when the debt came calling. I gripped the rifle tighter, my small hands aching from the cold metal as the howl of the wind battered the cabin's thin walls. Pa had said we'd make it through the night if we stayed put, but the shadows outside were moving, too deliberate for wolves or the storm alone. Lily huddled beside me on the floor, her breath fogging the air in quick bursts while Ma stirred the embers in the hearth, her face gaunt under the flickering light. Jack, keep that barrel pointed at the door. Pa whispered from his post by the window, his voice rough like splintered wood. He'd taken a hit earlier that day, scouting the ridge for signs of the Harlan gang. Those claim jumpers who'd been circling our land like vultures since the first frost. Blood seeped through the bandage on his shoulder, dark and stubborn, but he wouldn't lie down, not with the curse hanging over us like a noose. I nodded, though my arms trembled. At 15 years old in my head, but trapped in this boy's body that hadn't grown an inch since Ma's sister passed a decade back, I felt the weight of it all. The family secret. We Pemberton kids only aged when death claimed one of our blood. No growing pains, no birthdays that mattered. Just this endless childhood bartered for by lives lost. Lily, 2 years my junior in truth, looked even frailer, her eyes wide and unblinking as she clutched the knife Pa had given her. A crack split the night. Not thunder, but a boot on brittle snow. The door rattled on its hinges. Ma dropped the poker and snatched up the shotgun, her movements sharp despite the exhaustion carving lines into her face. "Elias, they're here," she said. No fear in her tone, just the steel we'd all forged from years of scraping by in this Oregon wilderness. Pa raised his pistol steady as the pines outside. "Jack, on my mark." But before he could call it, the door burst inward, splintering wood and letting in a blast of icy wind. 2 men tumbled through, faces obscured by scarves, rifles swinging wild. The first one lunged at Pa, who fired point blank, the shot deafening in the close space. The man crumpled, clutching his chest, but the second was on me before I could swing the rifle around. I dodged, my small frame slipping under his arm, and drove the butt into his knee. He howled, staggering, but Lily was there, my brave, silent sister, slashing at his leg with the knife. Blood sprayed hot and metallic, and he went down swinging, his fist catching her shoulder and sending her sprawling into the wall. "Get off her!" I yelled, firing the rifle at last. The recoil knocked me back, the bullet tearing through his arm. He slumped, cursing, but Pa finished him with a grim shot to the head. The cabin fell quiet again, save for the wind's mournful whine and Ma's labored breathing as she checked on Lily. Pa leaned against the table, paling fast. "That's 2 down, but Harlan's got more. We can't hold here." His eyes met mine, heavy with what he wouldn't say. The curse's cruel math. If he fell, we'd age, finally, painfully, but lose him forever. Lily whimpered, clutching her arm, a deep gash weeping red. "It hurts, Jack. Make it stop." I tore a strip from my shirt, binding it tight, my mind racing. We'd planned to fortify the cabin, use the storm for cover, but they'd come too soon, too bold. Now the back wall groaned under a fresh assault. More shadows, more guns. Ma reloaded the shotgun, her hand steady. We moved to the root cellar. It's defensible, and we can wait out the night. But as we dragged the bodies aside to bar the door, a distant crackle echoed, the barn igniting, flames licking up through the blizzard like hungry tongues. Our livestock, our winter stores, gone if it spread. Pa gripped my shoulder, his touch feverish. "You're the man of the house now, son. Lead them." I swallowed hard, the rifle heavy as fate, and nodded toward the cellar door. But in my gut I knew. This night would demand a price, and the curse waited to collect. The rifle bucked against my shoulder, the crack echoing off the canyon walls like a thunderclap that wouldn't fade. Dust swirled in the dry air as the last of the bandits toppled from his horse, clutching at the red bloom spreading across his chest. I lowered the barrel, my hand steady despite the tremor starting in my knees. Elias Pemberton, 15, going on forever, finally tasting the weight of a kill that might change everything. "Reload, boy," Pa shouted from behind the overturned wagon, his voice rough as gravel. He was crouched low, firing his own Spencer repeater into the fading haze where the outlaws had scattered. Ma huddled with the little ones in the shadow of the rocks. Little Sarah's eyes wide but unblinking, her face still that of a 7-year-old who'd seen too many sunsets without a single birthday. The bandits had come for our gold dust, the hard-won payout from the Klamath mines, but they hadn't counted on a family that didn't age like normal folk. Not unless death paid the toll. I fumbled for the cartridge, the metallic click loud in my ears as I chambered it. The curse, or gift, depending on the day, had kept us young while others withered. Pa looked 30 still, though he'd buried grandparents back east. Ma's hands were smooth, her laugh unchanged since the wagon train days. But each death we'd endured had pushed us forward, inching us toward lives we'd stolen from the grave. That last raid in '64, when Cousin Jed took a bullet, had added a year to us all. I could feel it now, the itch under my skin waiting for the cost. One bandit spurred his horse back toward us, hatless and howling, his pistol spitting fire. The shot wanged off the wagon's iron rim, inches from Pa's head. I raised my rifle, sighted down the barrel. The world narrowed to the sweat on his brow, the foam at his mount's mouth, and squeezed. He jerked backward, tumbling into the dirt, his cry cut short. The horse bolted, vanishing into the scrub oak. "Elias," Ma called, her voice sharp but not panicked. She never panicked, not even when the fever took Aunt Clara 2 winters back. Sarah clung to her skirt, whispering, "Did he die? Will we grow now?" The question hung there, innocent as a prayer, but heavy with the truth we all carried. We all carried. Every corpse was a step toward normalcy, toward escaping this eternal childhood. Pa stood, wiping blood from a graze on his forearm. 2 down, but the leader's still out there. "Harlan, you hear me? We hold the line." Harlan was my brother, 12 in body but sharp as a hawkbill knife, perched on a boulder with his slingshot loaded. Not much against guns, but he downed a rattler last week with a lucky stone. He nodded, silent, his eyes scanning the ridge. I scanned too, the sun beating down on the Oregon Badlands like God's own forge. We'd been heading for the Willamette Valley, chasing rumors of fertile land where a family like ours might blend in. But the gold had marked us, drawn these wolves. If they took it, we'd be back to scraping, and the curse would keep us small, overlooked until the next grave opened. A shout from the canyon's mouth. 3 riders reforming. The leader a scarred brute on a bay mare, waving a hatchet like it was Excalibur. Pa cursed under his breath. "Plans changed. Elias, you and Harlan flank left. Ma, get the young'uns to the creek bed. I'll draw 'em." "No," I said, surprising myself. The word came out firm. Not the boys' whine it might have been a year ago. "We stick together. Last time we split, I didn't finish. Jed's death had aged us, yes, but it had hollowed Pa's eyes too." Ma's hand found my arm, cool and sure. "He's right, Thomas. We're Pembertons. We age as one, or not at all." The bandits charged, hooves pounding the earth into a drumbeat of doom. Pa fired first, dropping the leader's horse in a tangle of legs and screams. The man rolled free, roaring, and came at us on foot. Harlan's slingshot twanged. A stone cracked against the bandit's knee, slowing him just enough for my shot to find his shoulder. He fell, gasping, but not dead, not yet. I approached, rifle ready, the weight of it all pressing down. Sarah's voice piped up from the rocks, "Elias, don't let him make us old too soon." But as I stood over him, his eyes pleading, I wondered if this was the break we'd been chasing, a death that might finally let us live full measure. The bandit wheezed, "Mercy, for the gold." Pa kicked the hatchet away, his face a mask of grim resolve. "Mercy comes at a price, stranger, yours." One pull of the trigger and the itch bloomed into fire under my skin. I felt it then, the shift, subtle as a season turning. A year, maybe 2, stolen from the void. But as his body stilled, the canyon seemed quieter, the stakes sharper. We'd won the day, but the gold was bloodied now, and the valley ahead felt farther than ever. The rifle bucked in my hands, the crack echoing off the canyon walls like a thunderclap that wouldn't quit. Dust swirled around Father's boots as he spun toward the sound, his face paling under the brim of his hat. "Elias!" What in God's name? I didn't wait for the rest. The shadow in the rocks above us shifted, a glint of metal catching the late afternoon sun, and I fired again, the bullet whining past the intruder's ear. He was one of them, those claim jumpers from the valley who'd been dogging our trail since we crossed the Snake. Not the lawless sort with 6-shooters and snarls, but quieter men, driven by whispers of gold in these hills, whispers that had turned them mean when they found our homestead instead. "Get down, Ma," I shouted, my voice cracking higher than I liked. She was already moving, clutching the reins of the mule team, her skirts whipping as she ducked behind the wagon. Little Sarah huddled there too, her eyes wide but not a tear in sight. She'd seen too much already to waste breath on crying. Father lunged for cover, grabbing his own scattergun from the wagon bed. "Boy, you hit him?" "No," I admitted, reloading with fingers that trembled just enough to make the cartridge slip once. 16 years I'd been this size, frozen since Uncle Josiah took that fever back in '55. But the weight of the gun felt heavier every day. Missed clean. "But he's pinned." The man cursed from his perch, his voice carrying down like gravel. "Pembertons! You squatters think you can hide forever? That claim's ours by right. Law says so." Law. As if paper from some desk in Washington meant a dam in Oregon territory. We'd poured sweat into this land, turned sod into fields while dodging wolves and worse. But these vultures had come with deeds forged in desperation, and now they were picking at our edges. Father's eyes met mine over the wagon's edge, sharp and unyielding. He'd always been the steady one, the planner, mapping our moves like a chessboard even when the board was half burned. Elias, circle left. I'll draw him. I nodded, slipping the rifle strap over my shoulder. My legs burned as I darted low through the scrub, thorns snagging my trousers. Inside, my thoughts raced. If he kills father, we all age. Sarah jumps 5 years in a blink. I hit manhood overnight. And Ma? God, Ma couldn't take that. Not after losing the twins to the river last spring. We'd buried them shallow, marked the spot with river stones, and nothing changed for us kids. But one more death and the curse or whatever this was would unravel us like a pulled thread. The canyon narrowed here, a choke point where the trail funneled toward our cabin a mile off. I could hear the jumpers' voices now, more than one. They'd flanked us while we forded the creek. 4, maybe 5. Father's shotgun boomed, scattering birds from the junipers, and a yelp answered from above. I pressed against a boulder, heart hammering. Peering out, I spotted the leader, tall, bearded, with a scar twisting his lip into a perpetual sneer. He was reloading, oblivious to me. My mind flashed to the trap we'd half set yesterday. A log wedged in the crevice, rigged with vine. Not much, but enough if I could lure him. Elias! Father's call cut through the din. They're coming down. I whistled sharp, the signal we'd used hunting rabbits. The leader's head snapped my way and he raised his pistol. I bolted, feinting right then left, the bullet splintering rock where my foot had been. Closer, closer. Thorns tore at my sleeves, but I reached the log, yanking the vine with all my slight weight. It gave way. The log tumbled, crashing into the narrow path just as the man charged. He stumbled, arms flailing, and went down hard, his gun skittering into the dirt. I was on him before he could rise, knee in his chest, rifle barrel to his throat. Call him off, I growled, tasting blood where I'd bitten my lip. Or your boss here eats lead. He froze, eyes bulging. From the rocks, the others hesitated, weapons half raised. Father's voice rang out, do it. Or we end this bloody now. The leader wheezed, hold. Hold fire, you fools. They lowered their irons, stepping into view with hands up. 5 in total, ragged and road-worn, but alive. No blood spilled, no aging. Relief hit me like cool water, but it soured quick. They'd be back or worse, bring the sheriff with real badges. Ma emerged then, Sarah trailing like a shadow. She pressed a cloth to Father's grazed arm, her face set like flint. Tie 'em. We'll talk terms at the cabin. As we bound their wrists with rope from the wagon, the leader spat at my feet. Freak children. Everyone knows your secret. Won't save you forever. I met his gaze, saying nothing. Secrets had a way of aging worse than we did. But for now, we'd bought time, one clever pull at a time. The rifle's crack echoed off the canyon walls, and I ducked behind the splintered wagon wheel, my heart pounding like a stampede in my chest. Dust swirled in the air, thick with the scent of gunpowder and sagebrush as another shot whined past, embedding in the dry earth inches from my boot. Pa's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. Elias, cover the left flank! We ain't losing another soul to these claim jumpers. I gripped the old Spencer carbine tighter, its barrel still warm from my last volley. At 15, or was it 16? The years blurred since Ma's passing last winter, when my reflection in the creek finally sharpened into something taller, broader. The curse of our bloodline. We Pemberton kids only aged when death claimed one of us. A twisted inheritance from some forgotten ancestor who'd bargained with shadows in the old country. It kept us young, kept us fighting, but every loss carved years into our bones like a butcher's knife. And now, with Harlan and little Becca huddled in the wagon bed, their faces pale masks of the eternal 8 and 10 they appeared. I couldn't let these bastards take more. The rival miners, roughnecks from the California strikes, their eyes hungry for our claim on the Blue River gold, had ambushed us at dawn. We'd been hauling ore down from the dig when their leader, a scar-faced brute named Rawls, rode out with his gang, demanding we hand over the vein or die. Pa had laughed in his face, that stubborn grit of his flaring up, and now here we were, pinned in this godforsaken arroyo, bullets chipping away at our cover like teeth-gnawing bone. They're circling! I shouted back to Pa, peering over the wheel. 3 riders flanked the rim above, their horses kicking up red dirt. Rawls himself sat tall on his bay, reloading with deliberate slowness, his grin a slash of tobacco-stained teeth. I could see the calculation in his eyes. These boys knew our secret, whispered rumors from saloon talk in Baker City. Immortal young'uns, they called us, thinking it made us easy prey. But they'd underestimated the fire in Pemberton veins. A plan flickered in my mind, born of desperation and the tricks we'd learned scraping by in Oregon's wilds. The creek bed below us ran narrow, choked with willows and runoff from the spring melt. If we could draw them down. "Pod the water! Use the nitro." He nodded, his beard streaked with sweat and grime, eyes fierce as a cornered wolverine. At 42, he looked every bit the weathered trailblazer, but the curse skipped him. Only the children bore its weight, dooming us to watch the world age while we lingered in half-formed youth. He scrambled to the supply crate, prying open a tin of dynamite sticks we'd bartered from the sutler for blasting rock. "Harlan, light the fuse! Becca, stay low!" My brother, forever 10 in body but sharp as a hawkbill knife, struck the match with trembling hands. The sulfur flare lit his face, casting shadows that made him look ghostly. "What if it don't work, Eli?" he whispered, voice cracking not from fear but the weight of what failure meant. Another death, another forced step into manhood none of us wanted. "It will," I lied, clamping a hand on his shoulder. Grit, that's what kept us going. Human stubbornness against the unnatural. I rose just enough to fire, my shot clipping one rider's hat and sending him tumbling. The gang howled, charging down the slope, hooves thundering like Judgment Day. Pa hurled the bundled sticks toward the creek's narrowest bend, the fuse hissing like an angry rattler. We bolted as one, me scooping Becca into my arms, her small frame light as a bird despite the years she'd carried unseen. The explosion ripped the air, a thunderclap that shook the ground and sent a geyser of mud and water skyward. The creek bank collapsed in a roar, swallowing 2 horses and their riders in a churning froth of debris. Screams cut short, replaced by the groan of settling earth. Rawls reined up short, his face twisting in fury as the path flooded, cutting off his retreat. "You little freaks!" he bellowed, leveling his pistol. But Pa was already moving, his colt barking twice, once to the chest, once to the head. Rawls slumped lifeless, his gang scattering like coyotes. We stood panting in the aftermath, the acrid smoke mingling with the damp earth smell. Becca buried her face in my shirt, and I felt it then. A subtle shift, like bones stretching in sleep. Rawls's death and the 2 buried in the mud. 3 lives snuffed, 3 years etched into us. Harlan straightened, his shoulders broadening imperceptibly, while Becca's grip tightened with newfound strength. Pa holstered his gun, clapping my back. "Good thinking, son. But this claim's cursed us enough. We move on at first light. Head for the Willamette Valley, start fresh." His voice held no triumph, only the weary resolve of a man who'd buried too many dreams in Oregon soil. As the sun dipped behind the canyon, painting the floods in bloody hues, I wondered if we'd ever outrun it. The deaths that aged us, the secrets that isolated us. But for now we were alive, together, and that was victory enough. The rifle's crack echoed through the mist-shrouded pines, and I ducked low behind the fallen log, my heart pounding like a hammer on anvil. Elias was already moving, his lanky frame slipping through the underbrush toward the riverbank where Pa had last been seen. "Stay down, Jem!" he hissed over his shoulder, his voice tight but steady, the way it always got when he was calculating odds in his head. I wasn't about to listen. Couldn't, not with the shouts of those claim jumpers rising from the fog, their lanterns bobbing like malevolent fireflies. The Pemberton land wasn't much, just a soddy cabin and a claim staked against the Oregon wilderness. But it was ours, bought with Ma's dowry and Pa's blistered hands. And now, with the curse hanging over us like a noose, losing it meant more than dirt under our nails. I gripped the old Spencer carbine tighter, its barrel still warm from the shot I'd fired blind into the trees. It had been a warning mostly, enough to scatter their front line but not silence the leader, that snake-eyed prospector named Harlan who'd ridden in from the California strikes with a gang of roughnecks. They wanted our water rights, claimed the creek was seasonal and ours invalid under some new territorial law. Pa had argued till his face turned red, then gone quiet when Harlan pulled iron. That's when Elias and I had circled back from the trap line, hearing the commotion too late to stop it. Now Pa was out there, probably bound or worse, and little Sarah, frozen at 12 years old for a decade now, her eyes wide as saucers, huddled in the cabin with the door barred, her unchanging face a reminder of what the curse exacted. Elias signaled from the river's edge, a quick flash of his hand. 2 men downriver guarding the ford. I nodded, crawling forward on elbows and knees, the damp earth soaking through my trousers. The air smelled of wet pine and gunpowder, and every snap of a twig made my gut twist. We'd planned this on the fly while sneaking back. Elias with his knack for traps, me with the rifle Pa taught me to shoot straight. But plans had a way of crumbling out here, like the mudslide that took the old bridge last spring. As I neared the bank, a shadow detached from the willows. One of Harlan's boys, lantern in one hand, revolver in the other. He turned, spotting me, and raised the gun with a grunt. I fired first, the recoil slamming into my shoulder like a mule kick. He dropped, lantern shattering in a bloom of flame that licked at the dry grass. Elias was on the other in seconds, tackling him into the shallows with a splash that masked their struggle. By the time I splashed across, the man was face down in the current, Elias wiping blood from his knuckles. Pa's trail leads up the ridge, he said, breathing hard, his cautious eyes scanning the dark. But they're boxing us in. Harlan's got at least 5 more, and they've got the high ground. We pushed up the slope, the river's rush fading behind us. My mind raced. Sarah wouldn't age another day if Pa died tonight, but what kind of life was that, holed up while strangers took everything? The curse had started with great-grandpa's pact during the famine back east, they said. Immortality for the young until blood paid the toll. It kept us kids spry through the trail's hardships, Elias at 15 forever until Ma passed in 59, jumping him to 18 in a night. Me, I'd held at 10 since Pa's brother fell to fever, but it twisted us, made every loss a clock's tick forward. No wonder Harlan's lot thought us witches when Sarah didn't grow. Rumors spread faster than cholera. A shot whined past my ear, splintering bark. We dove behind a boulder, Elias pulling me down as bullets chipped the stone. They're close, he muttered, peeking out. Below, the cabin's lantern light flickered. Sarah signaling maybe, or just the wind. Harlan's voice boomed from the trees. Give it up, Pembertons. Your pa's trust like a hog, and that creek's mine by dawn. I clenched my jaw, the words fueling the fire in my chest. Elias, ever the thinker, rummaged in his satchel, pulling out the bear trap we'd set for pelts. The ravine, he whispered. Lure 'em there. Ground soft, trap'll hold, and the drop does the rest. It was risky, bolder than our usual caution. But with Pa's life on the line, caution felt like surrender. I stood, firing 2 quick shots into the dark to draw them, then bolted toward the ravine. Footsteps crashed behind me, shouts mixing with the thud of boots. Elias flanked left, vanishing into the shadows like a ghost. My legs burned, the Spencer empty now, but the ravine's edge loomed, a jagged scar from last winter's thaw, steep and unforgiving. I skidded to a halt, turning to face them. 3 came charging, Harlan in the lead, his mustache curled in a sneer, 2 others fanning out. Got the whelp, he yelled, leveling his pistol. But Elias sprang then, the trap's chain rattling as he swung it low. It clamped on the first man's ankle with a sickening crunch, yanking him off balance. He screamed, tumbling toward the edge, and in the chaos, Harlan fired wild. The bullet grazed my arm, hot pain blooming, but I lunged, tackling him as Elias grabbed the second. We rolled, fists flying, the ground giving way under us. Harlan was strong. His breath. The wind howled through the pines like a banshee, whipping snow into my face as I crested the ridge. Below, the valley sprawled under a leaden sky, the Pemberton homestead a faint smudge against the white. Elias's horse had thrown him 2 days back, snapping his leg clean, and we'd been crawling ever since. Me dragging him on a makeshift sled, the kids trailing with what supplies we could salvage. But now with the blizzard bearing down, I knew we'd never make it home without a miracle, or without someone paying the price. I dropped to one knee beside Elias, his breath ragged, face pale as the drifts. We push on, I muttered, though my own legs burned like fire. He'd been the steady one. The brother who'd mapped our claim, built the barn with his own calloused hands. If he went, it wouldn't just be his body we'd bury. It'd age us all a notch, steal another sliver of our cursed youth. The kids didn't understand it fully yet. To them, time was a game, pausing until the Reaper came calling. But I'd seen it enough. Ma aging a year for Pa's fever, then another for the stillborn. We Pembertons didn't grow like normal folk. We hoarded our days, rationing life against death's toll. Elias gripped my arm, his eyes sharp despite the pain. Leave me, Caleb, get the young'uns inside. His voice cracked, but there was no pleading in it, just that stubborn grit we'd all inherited from the old country. I shook my head, hauling him up. Little Sarah tugged at my coat, her cheeks rosy but unchanged. Frozen at 10 since Uncle Josiah's accident 3 winters past. Papa, is Uncle Elias gonna... You know? She meant age us. I ruffled her hair, forcing a grin. Not if I can help it, Sprout. We stumbled down the slope, the sled runners hissing over ice. The storm thickened, visibility dropping to a few yards, and that's when I heard it. The low rumble, not thunder but something heavier, like the earth groaning. An avalanche triggered by the wind's fury, tearing loose from the upper cliffs. It roared toward us, a wall of snow and rock blotting out the world. My heart slammed against my ribs. No time to run, no path clear. I shoved Sarah behind a boulder, yelling for Timmy to huddle with her. Elias tried to stand, but his leg buckled. Think, damn it. The river, frozen solid below the ridge, might hold if we could reach it. But crossing meant exposing the kids. Or the cabin. It was closer, but the slide would bury the trail. Elias met my gaze, reading my mind. The sled, he wheezed. Use it as a shield. Push me ahead, let it take the brunt. It was mad, but his eyes dared me to argue. I nodded, biting back the bile. If he survived, fine. If not, we'd age but live. I lashed the ropes tighter, positioning the sled like a battering ram with Elias aboard. Hold on! The kids clung to me as we charged, the roar deafening now, snow stinging like needles. The world tilted, the slide hitting with a force that knocked the breath from my lungs. We tumbled, the sled flipping, Elias's shout lost in the chaos. I clawed through the powder, surfacing with Sarah in my arms, Timmy sputtering beside us. The valley was a churning sea of white, but we'd cleared the worst, barely. Elias lay half-buried a dozen yards off, leg twisted worse but breathing. I dug him out, the kids helping with tiny, frantic hands. We're not done yet, I said, voice raw. The homestead lights flickered in the distance, a beacon through the settling drift. But as we staggered forward, I felt it, a subtle shift like time's slow tick resuming. Elias had cracked a rib in the fall, blood flecking his lips, but he was alive. No aging today, not yet. By dusk, we breached the cabin door, collapsing in a heap by the fire. Ma rushed over, her face lined deeper than I remembered. Had she aged waiting? The kids peeled off wet mittens, chattering about the big snow monster, their innocence a shield against the curse. Elias managed a weak laugh, propped on the cot. Told you we'd make it, brother. I poured him whiskey, my hands steady now. But outside, the storm raged on, and I wondered how many more tolls we'd pay before Oregon claimed us all. I gripped the rifle tighter, the wood slick with sweat and the metallic tang of blood from where I'd sliced my palm earlier. Pa's old Spencer carbine felt heavier than it should, like it knew what was coming. The cabin door hung crooked on its hinges, splintered from the last raid, and through the gap, I could see the shadows shifting in the moonlit yard. Those cursed riders, their horses snorting steam into the chill Oregon night. Eliza huddled behind me, her breath hot against my neck, small hands clutching my shirt. She hadn't aged a day since Ma died 5 years back, still that wide-eyed girl of 8. But her eyes burned with a fire older than the mountains. They're coming again, Jem, she whispered, voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. I nodded, not trusting words. The family curse hung over us like the fog rolling off the Willamette. Pemberton's only aged when death claimed one of us. Pa had explained it once back when he still had breath, blaming some witchy ancestor who'd bargained with the devil for immortality's cruel twist. Now it was just me, Eliza, and little Tim, who looked no more than 4, though he'd seen a dozen winters. We were frozen in time, a family of ghosts haunting our own lives, and these claim jumpers from the valley wanted our land bad enough to kill for it. The first shot cracked the air like thunder, splintering the doorframe inches from my head. I fired back blind, the recoil slamming into my shoulder, and heard a hoarse whinny in pain. Get down! I yelled, shoving Eliza toward the root cellar ladder. She scrambled, but Tim was slower, his tiny legs pumping as he dragged the shotgun Pa had rigged for him, too big but loaded with buckshot. Another bullet whizzed past, embedding in the wall with a thud that echoed my heartbeat. Why now? We'd held them off before, bartering peace with lies about striking gold that never came. But tonight, their leader, that snake-eyed Harlan with his scarred face and grudge from the war, had brought more men, torches flickering like hellfire. I could smell the smoke already, acrid and promising ruin. If they burned us out, the curse wouldn't save us from the cold or the wolves. We'd age or die the same as any sinner. I peeked through the crack, spotting Harlan dismounting, his boots splashing in the mud. Pemberton's, your time's up. That deed's mine by right of blood. His voice boomed, laced with that false righteousness. Blood? It was greed, plain and simple, after Pa refused to sell when the railroad scouts came sniffing. I chambered another round, mind racing. The early plan, ambush from the barn, had backfired last time when they torched it first. Now we were pinned, the cellar our only out, but it led nowhere but damp earth and forgotten roots. Eliza tugged my sleeve from below. Jem, the river. We can float downstream, lose him in the bends. Her idea, sharp as ever, born from those stories she spun while mending nets. The Willamette was swollen from spring rains, black and unforgiving, but it might carry us to the next claim where old Mr. Whitaker owed us a favor. I glanced at Tim, his face pale but set, clutching that shotgun like a talisman. "All right," I muttered. "On 3. Cover me." The next volley shattered the window, glass raining like icy hail. I burst out firing, shots barking into the dark, clipping one rider's hat clean off. He yelped and fell, but Harlan was closing, his men fanning out. Pain lanced my side, a graze, hot and wet. But I didn't stop, scooping Tim under one arm as Eliza yanked the cellar door shut behind us. We tumbled down into the musty dark, the ladder groaning under our weight. Above, boots thundered, voices cursing our names. In the cellar, the air was thick with the scent of potatoes and earth, our lantern sputtering to life in Eliza's hands. Tim whimpered once, but I shushed him, pressing a finger to my lips. "Quiet now. We're the Pembertons. We don't break easy." The words tasted like paws, gritty and true. We'd dig through the back wall, the one we'd weakened over months, straight to the riverbank. But as hammers pounded overhead, splintering the floorboards, I felt the curse's weight settle deeper. If we lost this fight, it wouldn't just be the land. It'd be us, unchanging forever in some unmarked grave. Eliza pried at the loose stones, her small frame belying the strength that came from never growing weary. "Hurry!" she urged, dirt caking her cheeks. I joined her, nails breaking as we clawed through. The first sliver of night air seeped in, carrying the roar of the river. But then, a scream from above cut short. Harlan's man, maybe, or one of ours in spirit. Death's toll would come, and with it the aging we both dreaded and craved. Tim's eyes met mine in the dim light, questioning, and I forced a grin. "Almost there, little brother. Hold on." We burst out into the underbrush, the river a churning beast mere feet away. Torches bobbed in the distance, shouts echoing, but the current called louder. I tied our meager pack, flour, the family Bible, paw's knife to Tim's back, then lifted Eliza onto my shoulders. Into the water. Swim like devils. The cold hit like a slap, dragging at our clothes, but we pushed off. The Pemberton grit carrying us around, the rifle bucked in my hands. The crack echoing off the canyon walls like a thunderclap that swallowed the world. Dust swirled around Elias's boots as he staggered back, clutching his side. His eyes wide with the shock of betrayal turned inward. I didn't lower the barrel, not yet. The Pemberton blood hummed in my veins, that old curse twisting like a knife. But for the first time it felt like mine to wield, not some ghost's whim. "Damn you, Caleb!" Elias gasped, sliding down against the jagged rock face. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark and accusing. He was the last of them, the uncle who'd come west with promises of gold and freedom, only to unearth the family secret buried deeper than any vein. The children who didn't age, not while the living held on. Me, frozen at 16 since Ma passed in 52. And little Sarah, still 9 in body, though her eyes had seen decades. We'd followed him here to Oregon, chasing whispers of a cure in the wilds, but he'd lied. It was never about breaking the curse. It was about feeding it, sacrificing kin to keep his own youth stolen. I stepped closer, the sun dipping low behind the pines, casting long shadows that clawed at the ground. My boots crunched over brittle sagebrush, each step a reminder of the miles we'd trekked, the storms we'd outrun, the nights Sarah had whispered fears into my ear while Elias spun tales to keep us compliant. "You think killing me ends it?" He wheezed, a bitter laugh bubbling up with the blood. "The curse don't care about bullets, boy. It's in the blood, always has been." Sarah emerged from the scrub, her small hands trembling around the knife she'd fetched from our pack. She was braver than I'd ever been. That much I'd learned these years. Watching her face the wolves last winter, or the fever that nearly took her when the river flooded. "He tried to drown me, Caleb," she said, voice steady as the creek back home. "Said one death for 2 ages. But we're done running his game." I nodded, the weight of the rifle pulling at my shoulders. The plan had backfired from the start. Elias's map to the cure leading us into this ambush of outlaws he'd hired, forcing us to fight not just for survival, but for the truth. We'd lost the pack mule to a bullet in the chaos, our supplies scattered like forgotten dreams, and now the canyon trapped us with night falling fast. But in the scramble, Sarah had found his journal. The pages yellowed with ink that confessed everything. The Pembertons' sin back east, A deal with some frontier preacher who'd twisted life into this eternal stall. Kneeling beside him, I pressed the barrel to his chest. Then let's test it. My finger tightened, the shot ringing out sharp and final. Elias slumped, eyes glazing over the horizon, and something shifted inside me. A warmth spreading from my core, like roots breaking soil after a long freeze. I felt it in my bones, the creak of years catching up, lines etching faint around my eyes as I touched my face. Sarah gasped, dropping the knife, her own cheeks flushing with the bloom of growth, arms lengthening just a fraction before our eyes. We sat there in the gathering dusk, the canyon silent save for the distant howl of coyotes, the curse broken but not without cost. Elias's body a stark reminder that freedom came stained. Sarah leaned against me, her head heavier now on my shoulder, and we watched the stars prick the sky. Tomorrow, we'd bury him proper and head east. No longer children in a timeless trap, but wanderers with the weight of time finally on our side. The trail stretched endless, but for once it felt like ours to claim.